I am a big fan of the play skills area because I think it's one of the great underappreciated, underlooked at areas. When your child gets diagnosed with autism, and I know having been there and done that, a lot of us, what you're hearing about is a delay in social skills and a delay in language skills. And you're also hearing about a whole host of behaviors, repetitive behaviors that your child is engaging in, right? Those are the three areas that build the criteria for an autism diagnosis. And so, of course, I think a lot of us go, all right, well, what am I going to do to help my child in terms of social skills? And what am I going to do to help my child in terms of language skills? And what am I going to do to work on these repetitive behaviors? But most of the time, I think we're focused on the social and the language. And if you don't agree, write and tell me, because I just know myself and the moms that I've talked to that's, you tend to be the most concerned about those kinds of things. And yet, there are so many different areas that will go hand in hand with a deficit in these other areas that aren't necessarily a part of the diagnosis, but again, will go hand in hand with it. And what we see is that the things that are within the play area will not only help, of course, with the social area, the deficit in the social area, because if you are able to play, you can work on social things, right? But also when we play, it can be something where we're working on language, and it can be something where we're working on fine motor and gross motor and adaptive skills and so many other, really, cognition and executive functions as well. Because if play is reinforcing, we can work on almost anything under the guise of play, right? But did you hear the big asterisk there? If play is reinforcing. And what we see with a lot of kids on the spectrum is that when they start therapy, play isn't reinforcing to them. And this is often a big frustration to parents and something that we'll see, but maybe not put into context. So, for instance, the child that you give that toy to, that cause and effect toy, that you push the button and something pops up and it plays music, and, it could be a Sesame Street toy, or it could be a SpongeBob toy. They make them in every possible, a Barbie toy, a Disney princess toy, right? But these cause and effect toys exist, and you push the button and something pops up. And this is something that we give to very small children, and that we set in front of them and hope that they're going to enjoy playing with it, because there's something reinforcing about it. You push cause and effect, you push the button, and this thing happens, and it's supposed to be that the baby goes, yay, and loves that, so that they'll do it again. But for a lot of our kids, we put that toy in front of them, and if the child went over to it at all and pushed the button once, sometimes they cried when the thing popped up, or they saw the thing pop up, and it wasn't of any interest to them whatsoever, so that toy never got played with again. And maybe in the back of our minds and in our hearts, we went, oh, I don't know why my baby doesn't like that toy, right? But we tend not to push it. Unfortunately, though, when a child doesn't find a toy reinforcing, then it leaves out this whole area where we could be learning and growing. And we don't hit some markers in terms of joint attention. I always make this gesture, because we want to get to the point with toys where we're enjoying them with the child, that the child's looking at us and seeing our reaction to the toy. And that's a huge milestone that children have to meet. But what do we do for our kids when it's either scary to them, flat out aversive, like the toy makes a noise or it does something and they don't want to have anything to do with it, run away from it, or it's just boring? It's a lump that sits over there, and they don't care that it lights up and plays music, and that, marbles spit out of it and balls shoot out, and it's just not interesting to them. Or for a lot of our kids, looking at it and they just think of it as work. It's not gratifying to them. What do we do for those kids? Well, if you've been watching the show, basic principle of ABA is that in order for any behavior to be maintained, it has to be reinforcing. So already we're in trouble here, because if it's not reinforcing, then the behavior is not going to be maintained, right? If play is not reinforcing, the child is not going to go over and do it on a regular basis. And we see what happens when we let that go, that we end up with the 15-year-old who doesn't know how to manage their time, and sometimes even just sits there and is doing nothing or staring staring at the TV or staring at an electronic device or only playing one game and not being interested in everything. We don't want to get to that place. By the way, we wouldn't give up on that 15-year-old because we can make other things reinforcing to that 15-year-old as well. It's a lot harder work, but it can be done. What we want to do is start with them when they're very young, as soon as we can catch them. I say that very young, and then I think, well, but wherever you are, today is a good day to start making other things reinforcing to the child. We want play of whatever kind we can to be reinforcing. So we might start with something that's already reinforcing to the child, but then we're going to gradually branch out from there and take other play activities and start to make them reinforcing. Well, how do we do that? And a lot of times you guys will write in and say the reinforcing thing is the most difficult thing to understand. And I think I'm actually going to have Evelyn Gould talking about that in the next hour because it's really, really confusing. How do we reinforce? How do we know what to reinforce? How do we know when to change it? Right? I think it's one of the hardest things because it involves creativity and keeping track and, letting go of your expectations. I think that's one of the hardest things about reinforcement. But in any case, let's say that your child is only into horses. Picking something randomly, but you fill in the blank, because a lot of times our kids will get obsessive about one thing. And sometimes it's not a toy, by the way. My son was obsessed with the vacuum cleaner as a child. Wanted to take it apart and, constantly deal with the hoses and look at it and examine it. Very interested in the vacuum cleaner. But let's say that it's horses, that your child is so into horses. What are you going to do for that? And every time you do a preference assessment, the child is only interested in horses. Well, what we want to do as soon as we can is make other things reinforcing for this child. And, we're going to branch out slowly into other things. And so maybe they've got a plush horse that they're really into, a My Little Pony, and that's great. But so now we move to a different kind of horse. And we've had Dr. Jonathan Tarbox in here talking about how they've done studies on this, and that when you keep in the same family but just monkey with a little bit, you're more likely to be successful. So you start with a plush My Little Pony and you go to the hard plastic little horse and have them play together. Have the horse and if they're playing with a My Little Pony, you come over with your horse and you're playing in terms of that. You may have to do more than that. You may have to pair that with something else that's reinforcing on top of that to make this exciting, right? And then we branch into, well, what? Whether it's tickles or, maybe if your child finds running reinforcing, that you're running with the ponies, or there's a food item that you're pairing with it, that when they play with the two ponies together, that you're reinforcing that and then fading that reinforcer. You're always praising, but helping to build that other things are exciting as well, and starting slow and branching out. But what I wanted to talk about specifically today is constructive play and arts and crafts, because there's so many different areas of play, right? But we definitely want to help our child to find it reinforcing to do constructive play, and we want to help them to find it reinforcing to do arts and crafts. Constructive play, because there's a whole executive functions element of that's going to help them, and I think it's both true for boys and girls now, and I think maybe years ago we could have said more for the boys, but it's going to help them to be able to play in lots of different ways, whether the construction is Legos or sand castles. There is that element of being able to play side by side with peers that are also doing that kind of play, but also understanding the concept of, we're building something, and the physics of how do we build something. That in the beginning, just stacking the blocks, how high can you get before it tilts over? And how securely do you have to put the blocks up before it will tilt over on its own? Can be great, for cause and effect. that we build the block as high as we can and we make it tumble down. Some children find the destruction very reinforcing. That's okay. That's perfectly okay. We'll build it as high as we can and then we're going to knock it down, right? And then building the smaller base and building it up higher. This is going to help the child with so many different areas. And while you're working on the constructive play, you could be working on colors as well. You could be working on numbers. You can be working on eye contact. You can work on taking turns, all these wonderful things eventually that you can get to with constructive play, but you got to make it reinforcing to begin with. And if it is that building it up and letting them knock it down is the reinforcer, all to the good, all to the good. And then of course for arts and crafts, we're going to see that as soon as they start going to school, whether it's preschool or kindergarten, there's going to be an element of arts and crafts. Arts and crafts works on fine motor, all the finger and hand skills, but being able to conceptualize things, it helps with being able to express themselves. It's a wonderful thing that we don't want to leave out of our child's education. And if we wait until they get to kindergarten to work on arts and crafts, for some of our kids, they're going to have sensory issues. The paste gets on their hands, the glue gets on their hands, they're gluing feathers down, it gets stuck to things, or they get some kind of color on their hands. For some kids, that can be overwhelming. If we start working on this at home and make it reinforcing for our kids to play with these things and reinforce them for the arts and crafts that they build, a really exciting skill for our children. And it can help them with social skills, help them with language skills, help them with executive functions, being able to put something together and finish it, achieve a goal. It's a lovely thing. We've talked before on the show, and I know at some point we have a video to show that we're not done with yet, but one of the things, this weekend it's coming up again. The Home Depot here in the United States, and most of you live close to a Home Depot, on the first Saturday of the month, I believe it starts at 9 or 9:30, they have a wonderful activity for kids that's free. You can go at the Home Depot, you don't have to sign up in advance, which I love, and they have they have these little baggies that have these crafts for kids. Every month it's something different, and it kind of goes with whatever the month is. And you may go the first time and say that it's too much sensory for your child because it has screws and hammer, and they'll lend them a hammer. They give a lovely apron, and they lend them goggles so that they can wear while they're doing, and they'll lend them a hammer. And they get this craft in a bag, and you open it up, and there's instructions, and there's all the little wooden pieces that go with it, and the nails or the screws or whatever they need. And then at the Home Depot, they have an opportunity to paint it too. They have like a paint station that they can go to and paint the craft, and sometimes there are stickers to be applied. Well, this is so brilliant in so many different ways, you guys, because wherever your child is, it may be that you're taking the 2-year-old there and all you're doing is picking up the craft. To save it for another time, it's free, but getting out and seeing the other kids is a wonderful entree to that. Then, eventually you may get to the point where you just sit there and watch the other kids build so that they're getting used to the sensory of the hammers, and see if the child then wants to be able to do it. And at some point you can start to try to build. Yes, in the beginning, it's mostly going to be you hammering the little things in, but you've got the instruction sheet there that's got pictures, and you can be pointing that out to the child. Don't try to push it. Like if the child is not as interested, it comes in time where they see all these other kids doing stuff. Eventually, there might be one aspect of it that they find interesting. Like they may be really into the paint portion of it. So if you have to build it and then they paint it, it's a really wonderful thing, and they can work on so many skills, and it can be a social time, and it's free. Don't we love that? So that's at the Home Depot the first Saturday of the month. So that will be this Saturday. You can call and check on the time, but it's either 9 or 9:30, and you can show up a little bit late. They're very flexible. What's also great about it, you want to talk about reinforcement for the kids, when they're done, they hand their hammer back in and their goggles back in. They get to keep the apron, which is very reinforcing. And and they are given a pin to put on their apron. If you have a little child, you might want to put that aside for them, but it's a very pretty little glossy pin that they get, and they get a certificate that says that they completed the project, whether they did or they didn't. And Home Depot is really committed to helping our kids too and being patient with our kids. So literally, if you say, it's going to be too much for my child, I need to take it home, they're happy to give it to you to take home. You just don't get the benefit of the paint station. So, but I know some people that take the craft home, build it at home because it's less sensory stuff, so they can do that, and within the hour come back and paint it at the paint station. So you can always do that. We love the Home Depot. It's a wonderful thing.